that and to fill in any gaps. It also might look like students leaving the general education classroom to receive support from a special ed teacher, reading one of our classics to keep, like Ms. Milligan just spoke about. Maybe it's not something that they're ready to read on their own, but they absolutely can understand it. So they would be getting a smaller group where they could listen to the teacher read it, they could discuss, they could ask questions, they could start to develop that literary language, and then maybe have a separate fluency or phonics lesson so that they're working towards being able to access that text on their own. I also think our emphasis on, as Ms. Milligan talked about too, just developing the whole child, and that we have an emphasis on truth and beauty and goodness, makes it just a really great place for kids that do learn differently or appear different. I was actually having a conversation today with one of our executive directors about a particular student that's been a part of Monte Vista for many, many years and is well known, and that has special needs. And I was telling him, that our students, they don't patronize the kids. They don't, there isn't this like feigned acceptance. They really, because they start to see themselves and others the way their teachers see them, the way their administrators see them, they see their strengths, and they form authentic and genuine, wonderful relationships. And so I think that one, they get this cream of an education, and then they also get that goodness, that love, and that acceptance, because it's something that we want to be a part of everything that we do.
That's truly beautiful. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And what's something I want to mention for the panel or the attendees who are here, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And as we're talking, I really encourage you to input your questions there. And at the end of the panelists' discussion, we are excited to answer your questions. So you'll find that again at the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Really beautiful. Thank you, Monet. So Great Hearts is perhaps unique in the sense that our SPED model is what we call an inclusive model. And it's something that how might affect the general ed population of students and the special ed students actually similarly, where it might benefit them both. Brooke, can you speak to how the general ed students are benefited from having SPED students in their classroom, and what that inclusive model looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. One, I want to say, like, we are probably going to be very redundant tonight in a lot of what we say, because a lot of what we do and why we have a passion and what brought us to Great Hearts is the same. And that's the fact that we believe that all children not only deserve, but have a right to be included in this journey that Great Hearts seeks towards truth, goodness, and beauty. That, again, like Ms. Lessner was saying, we not only focus on academics, but also raising children in virtue. And that it's really imperative that students need to acknowledge their strengths and weaknesses, but also those of others. To learn that, like, not only giving help is important, but also the ability to ask and receive help. It's a huge thing that we use in our everyday life as an adults, and something that makes us, again, more human. And at Great Hearts, we are the models for our students. When our students see our classrooms embracing different types of learners, they learn to embrace different types of people. When our students know that we just keep trying new things or methods until it clicks, they learn to not stop trying. And when our students hear our words of encouragement and see that we treat all of our students with respect and grace, they learn to do it too. And that's why we follow the inclusion model. Our inclusive model allows students to participate in that wonderful cream, to the greatest extent possible, because you're right, not everybody can have the same amount of cream. And so it can look a lot of different ways because it's tailored to the students that you're working with. It can look like Ms. Lessner was saying, like being in the classroom all day as a student with a little support from a special education apprentice teacher or lead teacher. And our role as special education apprentice teachers and lead teachers when we're in that general education environment is not to look like we are special education teachers. Our goal is to look like the apprentice teacher in the room and the lead teacher in the room, that we look no different. So we are going to help other students who aren't special education. Our goal is to focus on those students when they need help, but also to make sure that they realize they are part of a group and that we are here to support all students, including them. It can also look like a student who has behavioral difficulties, because we are a public charter school. We accept everyone. It is a lottery system. So we're going to get students who have behavioral difficulties, and they may have to join the classroom slowly. So they might have to start with one subject or less than a subject and slowly work their way up to handle more of that classroom. It can look like a child with an intellectual disability or autism who may need some small group instruction for help with learning reading and math concepts, but loves to like listen to the literature read in class, those great books. And at like lower school, we have Charlotte's Web, we have The Cricket in Times Square. So there's so many great books out there that they can still listen to and learn what it is to be part of a group and a classroom. So it's really impossible to fully describe what the inclusive classroom is going to look like for each student and as a teacher. But I can tell you it always feels like joy. It's one of our proudest things is that we bring joy to the classroom, that we instill a love of learning. And that's what an inclusive model does. It spreads joy and allows us to meet the needs of all of our students.
That was really beautifully said. Thank you so much for that, Brooke. I'm really excited to continue this kind of thread of how we serve our students, and particularly how we support our teachers in order to serve our students and provide this rich cream type of education. So I'd love to hear more about the Teacher in Residence program, especially for those attendees who may not be in Arizona or may not be familiar with it. What is the Teacher in Residence program? And Wes, can you tell us more about that program and why you chose to participate?
Sure. The Teacher in Residence program is designed mostly for, you basically become a student teacher in the special education setting or department. So I started as, I was a gen ed teacher for several years here in Phoenix, and I joined the TIR program for a variety of reasons that I'll get into in a minute. And what I enrolled in as enrolling into the TIR is this program where I'm taking classes to become certified in special education through Great Hearts, so I learn the ins and outs of the all of the legislation and all of the administrative things. Right, I get a lot of time with a specialist and with what's called a cadre leader through the certification school here to work through that learning curve that comes along with this new position. There's a lot of things that are new about being in special ed at Great Hearts, but like everyone's said already, and like Brooke said so well about being inclusive, there's a lot that's not so different, because we work really hard in the gen ed setting to include these children in our lessons. And so really the difference is kind of a difference in scale, where I am now working with them more one-on-one or in small groups rather than a class of, say, 19 to 25 students. Rosalind, you asked me about the relation. You mentioned the relationship between teachers, or the support given to teachers, and I've received as a gen ed teacher for one, but also just this year as a sped teacher, I've received an exuberant amount of support. I'm drowning in support over here in Phoenix, and everyone from the headmaster, right? The headmasters are very knowledgeable, surprisingly, for me. They're very knowledgeable in the SPED process and what goes on. Sometimes we can, as teachers, tend to question our administration on certain things, but they really know what's cooking over here in the SPED department. The Also, we have a specialist assigned to regions here in Phoenix, and so I get to meet with my specialist once a week and go over the weekly plan, go over goals, any struggles I'm having, maybe some particular prickly parents or something like that I need to deal with or communicate with, how to communicate with them, because that is a bit different when you're the SPED teacher. You're kind of seen as the student's secondary headmaster in a way, if you're their case manager. I've also just received a lot of support from my coworkers, even the gen ed staff. I know that it's kind of the traditional tension that's supposed to exist between SPED teachers and gen ed teachers, but that doesn't really happen here. I mean, from time to time, we may rub up against each other, but this is a place where we're able to have the discussions that are necessary and to resolve whatever issues might arise. And I haven't met a single gen ed teacher that isn't fully committed to not only just implementing the plan and being compliant so we can continue, being a publicly funded classical school, right? That they don't see special ed as a necessary evil to keeping the schools open. They see special ed, just like I do, which is just a very necessary part in fulfilling the mission of the school. We aren't fulfilling the mission of Great Hearts if we are not open to receiving these children and serving them to the best that we can. We talk a lot, all over the Western tradition, there's a lot of talk about lifting up the lowly and serving the least of these. And that's something that really speaks to my heart. And that's something that got me involved in special ed. A lot of people I run across who say, Wes, what got you into special ed from the gen ed? Do you miss the classroom? And I say, well, I'm still in the classroom. I just have it's just a little bit different. But the reason I got into special ed is because I love the mission of Great Hearts and I love these children. And I want to be able to further that mission to the best of my ability. Yeah, there's a little bit of, a pay increase and all those kinds of things that come along with this job, with this position, but that's small potatoes. That's nothing of consequence. I'm here because I love Great Hearts. I love the mission, and I love these students.
It's encouraging to hear your obvious love for the students, and exciting to hear about how your journey has been so unique. I mean, starting from an apprentice teacher, moving to an upper school teacher, then going into SPED. It's exciting to see that progression. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So next, I'd love to hear more about the partnership between general education teachers and SPED teachers. I mean, so Kristen, you started as a teacher without any formal teaching experience, starting as an apprentice at Great Hearts. How did the SPED team support you as you moved from an apprentice to a lead teacher? What did that dynamic and training between the two kind of departments look like? Was it really separated, or was it really one unified team?
I'd like to just echo what Wes said about the support that comes from the special ed team. And since I've never been a teacher in a different type of setting, I don't know anything different, but I always feel incredibly supported by the special ed program. I'd love to get a shout out to Rebecca Rindall, who is the head of the upper school and lower school special ed team. It's very much like a family, and the family that is the special ed team is very much a part of the family that is the Great Hearts Northern Oaks team. And once again, it's all centered around the love that we have for the students and the desire that we have to help every single one of them. And some of them maybe need a little bit more help, which is why we have this extra group of people that are dedicated to those students. And something that Brooke had said earlier is that it can look like someone extra in a classroom. As a literature teacher, often what will happen is students that struggle with reading, whether or not it's because of dyslexia or other reasons, will have a push-in that will come into my classroom and observe them. They're very dedicated to reading the material. So I just had a conversation this afternoon with one of our special ed teachers who is reading 4 books right now because she needs to make sure that she's able to keep up with the students that are in different classes. And that same teacher last year was working with a group of my 8th grade girls who were sort of shy, and they had small group during Lyceum at the end of the day, and they discussed the reading from that night. And that gave them the confidence to be part of the general ed classroom discussion the next day. And I said earlier that part of the classical model is to have a foundation and courage to pursue truth. And I think that that's something that in general as a teacher, I see that my students that struggle with understanding material, with the extra attention from special ed teachers, they get that courage to be part of the conversation. One of my students in 9th grade that I teach now struggles with writing things, and he has a lot of great thoughts, but I don't have extra time to dedicate to him to sit down and kind of work through with him every single day that we have a writing assignment. But he sat down with Mrs. Rindall, and after about 20 minutes, he had given her 3 times as much as he usually writes on a test. And it's clear that when it comes to supporting us general ed teachers, the manpower that it takes to help each student understand the material and move through things that would take them a little bit longer helps us give them the same cream, as Mrs. Lesner was saying earlier, without belittling them. They're able to digest it. We could give it to them, but it might take a little bit longer for them to be able to do that digestion. So the general ed team is hugely supported by the SPED team, and I think that partnership is evident every single day as a teacher.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to piggyback from the other side of it, because when you're looking to work at a school, one of the things you look to work for is the support you're going to get as a special education teacher too, and what is it like working with gen ed teachers. And what I can say, thanks to Rosalind and her amazing team, as well as our amazing headmasters, is I am always in awe of the crazy amount of talent that is brought to Great Hearts. But not only that the people that come to Great Hearts to teach really believe in our mission and our pedagogy. So everybody's really on the same page. And even though I hear a lot from people coming in like, what's it like? Because not all of your general education teachers have education degrees. So like, what's that like? And what I can say is that they have a heart to understand the why, and that I appreciate. I have been in schools, I have been in places where perhaps like they don't care the why, they just want you to tell them what to do. What I love about working with the general ed teachers I get to work with is I'll tell them like, okay, here are their accommodations, here are the times they have resource, and they're like, okay, so why? What are you working on? What's going on in there? They have a genuine interest in what is going on. And our headmasters are the same way. Like, I have never felt so supported from administration. Like I'll say something and they'll be like, oh, but why? Or, oh, okay, so how do I learn more about that? And I can't say enough how wonderful it is to be in a place that not only sees special education as what it is, a national requirement, right? Like, but also sees it as part of the culture of the school and crucial to their mission statement. And that's truly what makes Great Hearts, like sets you apart from working in your local ISD or working in another charter. Like Great Hearts truly believes in that truth, goodness, and beauty. And that's so essential and aligned with special education.
I want to add one thing to that as well. And it's something that I had been thinking about, this week as we were getting ready for this panel, and Brooke just touched on it. I taught special education for many years before then moving into reading intervention and administration. But our general ed teachers, so if you are coming in as a special ed teacher, you're not going to have to deal with somebody saying, well, no, I don't want to do those accommodations. I mean, you may have questions for sure, because what Miss Lucero is saying is true. Like, they want to understand why, and our teachers want to make sure the kids are getting the cream also. And so if they're afraid that maybe something's going to keep them from getting the cream, they're going to want to know more. But when I think about my general education teachers, they are constantly advocating for their kids that have different learning needs. And so really there's a lot of partnering going on, because they want to make sure that the kids are being successful and doing as much as they can. So sometimes I have to tell my general teachers, no, we're not going to give any more support. Like, they can do this on their own. I know you want some more help in there. But this is a good amount of independence for your kiddo. And I have seen kids that might have fallen through the cracks in some places not fall through the cracks, because our teachers are relentless about wanting them to engage and be successful in meaningful and authentic ways. And so it creates a really lovely partnership. We're all human beings, so we don't always agree, and we're not always on the same page, but also part of our culture, which is one of the number one reasons that I'm here, is we work through things. We discuss and we look at each other's perspectives, and we treat each other with dignity and respect, and we model it for our students. And we expect it of them, and we expect it of each other. So when you do come up with a gen ed special ed conflict, you work through it for the good of everybody.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I'd love to dive in at this point to some great questions that y'all have inputted in the Q&A box. I'm going to summarize a couple of your questions in one. So let's just start with, what are the certification requirements? Brooke, would you be willing to speak to that?
Yeah, so if you're looking at a lead teacher position, which is a case manager, so someone who is guiding the instruction, planning the instruction, for special education position, you do have to be certified in your state. So you have to get that certification. Now, as has been highlighted in this program, there are lots of ways to go about and different programs offered to help you get that certification. So we do have our teacher in residence program, which Mr. Hardin spoke about. We do have a teacher pathway here. Those programs do, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you start with a bachelor's. Yes, I'm seeing nods of heads, but you don't have to quote me on that. But there are also great programs in your state, and you can look them on usually your Department of Education website, that if you're not certified, that you can go through to get those certifications. But in the meantime, if you have a heart, if you have some experience with special education, that apprentice teacher role that Mr. Hardin spoke about, while we love it for people that have an associate's or bachelor's, we also have got some great apprentice teachers who don't necessarily have that, but have children with special needs or worked with special needs through different camps or clubs outside of Great Hearts. And we're very willing to interview and bring you on and help you get to the point where you could be a special education lead teacher or coordinator or administrator as well.
Excellent. Thank you for highlighting that, Brooke. That's beautiful. So let's share a little bit about what the professional development looks like that might be particular for SPED teachers. And even for some of you who have been both general ed teachers and SPED teachers, how are you personally developed as a teacher at Great Hearts? Wes, can you speak to that?
Yes, I can. So when it comes to different professional development for someone in the TIR program, like myself, the professional development, is happening all the time. right now with a lot of the remote requirements, we're utilizing Brightspace to bring people up to speed with, just like the general requirements of competency and compliance. But we also have regular meetings together where we look at the more specifics of maybe my particular caseload or things like that. But also, I also participate in all of the professional development along with the gen ed. Sometimes my headmaster will dismiss me for whatever reason. It doesn't pertain, exactly to me enough to warrant my time there. But for the most part, most of my caseload, for example, is middle schoolers. So I attend all of the middle school meetings when we're talking about whether it's classroom management or we're talking about something that maybe just sped related. Maybe I'm actually offering the development that we're working through, sharing my experiences with certain kids and things like that. And then the lead office also regularly checks in with us for professional development needs, whether they kind of have their basic track that they have us on through Brightspace, but they also give us opportunities to branch out with maybe some things we are in particular need of support in. And what's great about the Brightspace option is that we can always go back and revisit it if we need to. Especially with things like, for those in the know, the prior written notice is like the dreaded thing that you got to do. And I've been really having to go back and revisit those. And it's been really helpful to be able to go back and have that there with me while I'm working through. There's just endless supports, but also the way they develop us in uniformity as a Great Hearts teacher to make sure that we remain as such, right? We don't, that there's not much drift there, but also as someone who's delivering specially designed instruction, who's becoming certified in these things, who's, my role shifted slightly from, being specifically a teacher of a classroom of students to a teacher of this caseload of students. And then I have these compliance officer sort of role to me now as well. And so that's where the biggest learning curve is for someone in my position. And so the development is there, and they're always offering workshops or webinars or able to zoom in with people and get the help we need.
Thanks so much. Some other great questions I'm seeing in the chat box refer to what this looks like with distance learning, which none of us would have been able to anticipate the needs that 2020 demanded of teachers. Who would like to speak a little bit to what providing services to SPED students remotely and now again in person in a more limited scale, what does that look like? Brooke, go for it.
Yeah, so we had a huge learning curve, the whole nation did. And so we have been, so let's just take a look at some supports that we offer. One, we are holding Zoom sessions for resource minutes, right? So students who were receiving that extra support, we are doing that live through Zoom, providing that. We're still providing accommodations such as extra time, reduction of work, graphic organizers. We've been able to utilize some really great computer programs where students can actually create graphic organizers online. As far as in-class support, we do a mixture of actually attending Zooms by the general ed teacher, but also offering office hours every day. And those office hour sessions are usually, like on our campus, we have teachers who offer them about an hour a day, and they can go in and they can get help on whatever topic that they need. And they can also go in and just talk to their special ed teacher if they're anxious about something or worried. And so that's a little bit of what our services look like. We're also doing some asynchronous methods, so some not live instruction with our children with autism and some of our low incidence students. We're using things like boom cards. And if you don't know that program, it's awesome and you should look it up. But we're using a lot of different resources where students can, there's a way in Google Slides to make it so that students can like slide something over. And so our students who are visual learners and not exactly, or who aren't verbally proficient yet, they can use those kinds of programs for some of their instruction. We also shoot videos of ourselves reading books and other materials. And I've been really, really happy with the progress that our students have been making and the amount of support that we've been able to give through this really difficult situation.
Thank you for sharing that, Brooke. Next question, there's a couple different questions, both regarding the IEP process, how you really create these individualized education plans. Can someone speak to who facilitates those ARDs? How are IEPs determined for students? How do you as a teaching team work together to make those IEPs? One particular question asked even about what does the reduction of assignments look like? Who would like to speak to them?
I can go again. I don't want to hog. Go, Miss Lester, go.
I'll say a little bit, and then Miss Lucero, I think it'd be good for you to finish. So, and there might be some distinctions between Arizona and Texas. So, Mr. Hardin, you may need to. It sounds like you have a specialist case manager, and we kind of have a lead teacher coordinator. So, if I say something that, or Brooke does, correct us. But for our campuses here in Texas, I think one amazing support is the special education coordinator. So Miss Lucero is a coordinator at one of our schools. When I taught special education at a large district in Texas, I had a great job. I loved it. But I taught, I lesson planned, I wrote the IEP, and I did all of that. But on our campuses, the coordinator is responsible for writing the IEP. Now they are collaborating with the gen ed teachers and the special ed teachers, but they are creating that large legal document and really allowing our special education teachers time to lesson plan and teach and provide support. It really frees up a lot of time and focus. And they facilitate, the coordinators facilitate the ARD meetings. So if you were a special ed teacher at one of our Texas schools, you'd be in those meetings discussing the student and their progress and how they're doing on their goals. But the coordinator would be facilitating, walking everyone through the actual IEP, which I think is it's a really, really great benefit to being a special education teacher at our schools.
Yeah, you really hit it right on the head. That's like my number one thing. I have an amazing team here at Great Hearts Live Oak, composed of 8. I have 4 lead teachers, 4 apprentice teachers, and they just rock the ship. My role is to write the IEPs. And what that looks like is, one, exactly what it says. All my teachers that came on board, the reason I brought them up is they all came from local ISDs. So they had not been part of the Great Hearts family yet. They were special ed teachers in their local public schools, and they came, and the number one thing they always say is, I can actually teach. Like, I actually have time to create good lessons, to teach. This is wonderful. Plus, it's like having a specialist on your campus. So these big districts, you have a specialist for like these 5 schools, and they travel around and they buzz around. But here, one of my main concerns is how am I supporting my special education teachers and my general education teachers by servicing them? And also, like, if they have any questions or something's just not working, they have a person that they can go to and float ideas off of, and who can set them up with our resources. Like in Texas, we have Region 20 down near us who provides a great amount of services. And if they're having difficulties with something, I can show them where they can get ideas. As part of that IEP process, we do hold what we call, over here at least, staffings. Staffings allow me to meet with my general ed teachers and my special ed teachers and get their feedback. We don't always hold a staffing. Sometimes we have a little form that goes out, and this year we're using Google Forms because we're so tech savvy now after learning COVID. But we send out a little Google form, and the teacher fills it out and gives us pertinent information like grades, what they're struggling in, any additional accommodations they think they might need. And the special ed teacher then talks with me about where she thinks the goal should go, or he, and their present levels of academic performance. And so it really is a really good collaborative effort, but it really does take a lot of strain off of our lead teachers.
Nice. Thank you for that, Brooke. Excellent. We have a lot more questions in the chat that we're unfortunately not going to be able to get to. We end here in about a couple minutes, but we can take one more question. And it looks like there's actually, I'd love to us to just address this question about ESL students and how they fall under special student services as well. Can someone speak to what we do to empower those ESL students?
I can talk a little bit real quick, and then Miss Lucero or Mr. Hart, anybody may want to add to what I say. But we also have ELL coordinators and teachers on our campuses, and they are hugely important. We live in an area where we have a lot of ELL students. And their role is very similar to the special education role. They are creating accommodations for these students. They are making sure those accommodations are happening, supporting general education teachers so they know how to do them well. They're giving extra support to the students too, which is sometimes pulling them out and working through the curriculum with them. Working on vocabulary, working on just all, speaking, listening, reading, writing, all of those things, and holding our LPAC meetings, and overseeing TELPAS and all the testing. But just like any typical public school, we have that support on our campus, and these are people that are just like the rest of our staff, that they just have a heart for our philosophy and our vision. Our ELL coordinator, Yolanda Flores, taught in many places, and she started with us as a PE teacher and a Spanish teacher, and just had such a heart for those students that were English language learners, just like she was growing up, that she ended up moving into and pursuing that position. And all of our teachers know if they need help getting something, their student is struggling, that, her door's open. They can just go right to her. And I know this is just the experience that, people have across the board.
I'd love to add to that. Just really quickly, we had talked a lot earlier about how the presence of the special ed students in our classrooms affect the general ed students, and how it's a partnership not only between their teachers but also the students themselves. And during the TELPAS testing phase or season, which is about February, there's a series of essays that students all have to write in order to pass their TELPAS, or to see how they're progressing in the program. And all of the students write it. So none of the general ed students are aware that it's for the sake of the L students. But at the same time, as a general ed teacher, those prompts that we all create and administer to our students every year are one of the highlights of the spring for me. It's amazing to read these assignments that are really sort of a gift from the EL students to their general ed classmates, that they don't really realize it, but that's something that is really beautiful that's brought into the class because of that presence.
I love hearing the theme of just the unity of community between not only the SPED teachers and the general ed teachers, but the general ed students and the SPED and ELL students, that it's really one unified community with the goal of developing every student holistically. It's really beautiful to witness, and very empowering to hear you all talk about that. We are out of time for tonight, but I want to emphasize that the conversation does not end here, but we are excited to continue the conversation with you. In the Q&A box, our colleague Elizabeth is typing away, answering questions for you that we weren't able to engage in this panel. Additionally, we would love to follow up with you by email. You'll be receiving some information from me about if you're already certified, how to apply and join our team for both mid-year needs, which are including our Great Hearts Online campus is still in need of some great special ed teachers, which will be a remote position. We're also in need of some mid-year sped teachers in both Texas and Arizona. But if you're interested in starting it fresh in the school year, those positions are available as well with us in both states. If you're not certified yet, then as we've talked about here, we have the TIR program, where if you already have a bachelor's, you can pursue this in Arizona. And additionally, there's a SPED Pathways program newly launched in Texas. Both of these programs in each state is us as Great Hearts partnering with you to help you earn your certification to become a SPED teacher. Something I want to note briefly too is even if you, this is particular to the TIR program, even if you are just interested in SPED and want to learn more and want to stay a general ed teacher, but want to learn how to serve your SPED students better, these are also great opportunities for you to pursue. Great, if it's not clear already, we really care about your development, just like we care about our students' development. We want our students to be lifelong learners. We want you to support you as teachers being lifelong learners as well. Keep that in mind. I'll be following up with all this information. Lastly, this has been recorded. I missed the first 5 minutes or so because I forgot, so I'm sorry about that. But I will also be sending you the recording of this if you'd like to keep it and reference it. Send it to other friends who you think might be interested. We welcome you to do that. Lastly, please join me virtually in thanking these amazing panelists for taking their time out of what is an absolutely busy season to talk and share about the power and the influence of working at Great Hearts. And thank you to those who have attended for your interest in Great Hearts, for your obvious care for students and children. And we are very excited to continue the conversation with you. We'll keep this webinar on with videos off as we continue answering a few of your questions in the chat box. Please feel free to also follow up with us by email. You have my email from the login information, and we will be in touch as well and can continue the conversation there. Thank you all and have a good night.